Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today we will be discussing which eyeshadow palettes I would repurchase just one more time. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. In today's video, I'm going to be taking 10 random eyeshadow palettes from my makeup collection and discuss with you whether I would keep these, whether I find them worth the money, whether they were a good purchase for me, and if I somehow lost them, would these ever make it back into my makeup collection? And this is a video idea that I've been doing for quite some time, and I'm just running out of palettes to talk about with you guys. So that's why I will be retiring this video idea for 2024, and I will be back in 2025 with a new video series. So if you have any suggestions of things you would like to see me do to replace this series, let me know in a comment down below, because I would love to hear your ideas to see what I can do with that. But yeah, I love doing videos where I don't only talk about new stuff, but where I can also chat to you guys about makeup I already own, and that has sometimes been in my collection for years, and just have a good old rave. So I hope you enjoy watching this video one more time. Let's get to these palettes. So to my surprise, because I keep a little list of palettes that I've featured in this video series to try and not to have too much overlap, but I had never talked about these ones again. These are by Zoeva. They are the Velvet Love eyeshadow palettes, and I have 3 of these. 3 little 4 pans. They're very Charlotte Tilbury coated once you start playing with them. I have said that these are just as good as Charlotte Tilbury quads, but these are at least half the price point at full price. So Zoeva is a very slept on brand. They're not the kind of brand that a lot of people are talking about anymore. They've completely rebranded a couple of years ago, and I think that in their quest to be more sustainable and do all that, they also don't really send anything to influencers anymore, I guess. So that does get them just a lot less attention in the online beauty game. But this was one of their later releases that was very, very intrigued with, because Zoeva eyeshadow has been one of my favorite formulas in history, you could say. So when they came out with these little quads, I knew I wanted to try it. I have, what is it? Where does it say the name? Oh, on the back. Beautiful Bright Eyes. This is the most neutrally one. This is essentially like Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk. It's very much Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk quad. Then Emerald Green Eyes, which is my favorite of the 4. That's what this one looks like. And then finally, the Glorious Golden Eyes, which is this palette right here. And if my camera is struggling to focus on some of these images, like when I hold it up close, we're having a full-on autumn storm at the minute, so the weather isn't being very kind, so I've tried to make my camera settings to be as helpful as possible for you guys, but yeah, the weather is a bit freakish today. But yeah, those 3 little palettes are really good ones. They are pricey for what they are, I think, even though they are half of what the Charlotte Tilbury ones are. One of the main things I didn't like about the line was that all of the color stories were really warm toned. There was one that looked to be a little bit more cool toned, but it looked so gray and weird leaning that I wasn't a huge fan. And I've heard loads of people say that they've decluttered these palettes instantly because they didn't like the formula. I love the formula in these palettes. It's smooth, it's creamy, it applies beautifully, but it doesn't have the kind of impactful shimmers that are really making the rounds in the makeup world. So nowadays, if you don't have really impactful high shine shimmers, people don't even care if they can't pick it up with a brush. They just go in with fingers because that's what gets you the payoff, and they don't care if they can blend it. I am someone who rates eyeshadow quality, but with how well it works with brushes. Anything looks good in a finger swatch, you know? It's when you start blending and playing with things that you really truly understand how good a product is made. And I feel with these little Zoeva quads that they are a lot better made than a lot of people realize. It's just not... They're just not really tapping into what the makeup game is all about at the minute. This is a little bit more subtle, a bit more for every day. It's not super impactful and shiny, and incredibly out there and in your face, which is what a lot of people seem to be going for, especially within the influencer realm and like the kind of things that they like to promote, which is very indie makeup heavy and like very expensive stuff, because that's what you can use affiliate links with. That's pretty much how it works. And Zoeva isn't one of those brands, and that's why I think nobody was mentioning them. I'm really glad I tried them, but I still prefer my old 10 pans that I've had for years. And Zoeva is one of those brands that slowly but surely became more and more expensive over time. I remember the first 10 pans from this brand that I bought were like 15 or like 17.50 in euros, and these are 27, and you only get 4 shades. So if I compare it to products I already have from the line that were far cheaper, that I like just as well or even better than this, was it worth it? I'm not really sure, but I was really, really happy that I got to try them. It is a lovely formula. It can be a little bit up there in price for just 4 shades, but there are people who have no issues with dropping even more than this on 4 shades of eyeshadow. So it depends on what price point you feel comfortable trying out and what you're looking for in a shadow. I really like these. If you like softer, less shiny formulas, they're definitely worth a chance. And I definitely think one of these is going to stay in my collection, but the other 2, I think I'm going to declutter. As lovely as they are, these are a little bit forgotten and tucked away in my eyeshadow palette drawer. I don't really go back to them. I never think about them again. So from a usage perspective, this wasn't a good purchase for me. But from a makeup I want to try from a brand I know I love kind of perspective, this definitely was worth it in the end, because this just showed me that Zoeva still does really beautiful things. They're just not willing to play the game that everybody seems to be playing, which in itself I think is remarkable in this day and age that they're not doing that. But as a result, the brand has been getting harder and harder to find for a lot of people. I think my best bet to try and find them still till this day is to go online again, whereas this brand used to be stocked in my local Douglas. So they have definitely sized down, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think they are making smart decisions that work for them, but it's not going to appeal to the massive, and especially not to people on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram. It's just not that kind of vibe. For me, in the end, I was really happy with it, but these would not be repurchased if I lost these or if my house burned down and I had to start over my makeup collection. These would not be top of mind for me to be purchasing them. If any of the 10 pans would still be available, which they're not, but if those were available, I would pick any of those, even the ones I like a little less, over these ones for sure. And I realized I haven't really spoken much about Viseart in my little series that I've been doing. So I did find in my little list that I've discussed the Petit Cool Matte. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that, you can do that there. But I have a lot of the Petit Pros in the little 8 pan section as well. I have a bunch of the city ones, which with Viseart, I'm like, try to stick to a good thing while you're doing it, because they did these like London, Paris, and San Francisco palettes for a while. They came out like, I think we first got the Paris, that did pretty well, and then a year later we got the London and the San Francisco, but they just never kept doing it. So I don't know what's going on with Viseart, what they are trying to do here, but my first Viseart palette that I still have is the Petit Pro 3. Not because it is so good, but because this was the first Viseart palette I tried that made me realize how good Viseart quality is. The color story, not really my vibe, especially not nowadays, but this was the one that was out at the time that appealed to me the most. I think I bought this off of the recommendation of Emily Noel, who was raving about these green tones, and prior to this I had tried one of their Pro palettes. So the Viseart line, when they got started all those years ago, I think it was like 2015 or something when I first discovered Viseart, were these MUA-oriented large, well, they weren't that large, they were pretty sleek palettes, but they were 12 pans that had really big pans. They came with like 2.5 grams of product in each shadow or something crazy like that. Like a normal person would just struggle to ever use it up. And they had like an all matte palette and like a shimmer palette, and I had one of the shimmer ones. I think it's like the Sultry or the Sultry Muse, that's what it was called, and I really, really didn't like it. Not because I didn't like the formula, it was just really hard for me to create looks with it, because you just needed so many other things to make the palette work. So Viseart was one of those brands where I felt like, you know, it was magnetic, so it was very much more MUA focused, and I don't think of myself as an MUA at all. I'm just a regular gal doing my makeup. So once they became more consumer oriented and they started doing smaller things, I decided to try them again, you could say. So this is one of the first things I bought, so it's very nostalgic for me in that sense, because this made me realize how good the mattes are that Viseart does, and how their shimmer formula actually compares to the mattes. Because I had an old shimmer palette, I didn't have that comparison. So I was like, everything kind of blends together and looks the same. And maybe also by the time I bought this, my makeup skills had advanced, because I think I bought the Viseart palette quite early on in my makeup journey, and I really didn't have the skills that I do now. So I definitely think that came into play as well. So this was a good reminder of me. This is similar to like the Zoeva, something I bought from a brand I had tried. With the Zoeva, I had tried lots of successful things, and these I'm like, And here's the other way around. I tried something that I felt wasn't very successful for me, and this made me realize how lovely the brand is and what good things they can do. But this is not a color story I ever think of. I never think even of owning this. I think in 2025, it may be time to just keep my favorite Viseart palettes as is, and to take all the rest of them apart and put them into Z palettes, because they're taking up space in my, like, they don't take up a lot of space because they're small dinky things. That's why they get to stay a lot of the times. But with especially the palettes I'm talking about today, like for instance from this one, I would only want to keep these two shades and the two greens. These two things and the browns can go, because here's the thing, if you have a couple of Viseart palettes, there's a brown and like a light creamy matte in every single one of them. Every single one of them. So you just get so many shades that are just really slightly nuanced differences of the same thing. So from these palettes, I would only keep the things that are more unique in my makeup collection, and I would probably want to chuck the rest. But since I love Viseart, I haven't been able to get myself to do that yet, but I think it's time. I think it's time. I just need to get rid of so much eyeshadow in 2025. I just know. And then the other two palettes I have are the San Francisco and the London Étoile. So I think this is the way you read it. Yeah, with the little tag down like this. This way you can read it. And what's lovely about these palettes is that when you flip them over, you get the skyline of the city that they represent. And this is why I'm like, Viseart, why did you stop doing these? I don't get it. The Paris is their more cool tone one. That definitely gets to stay. It's not going anywhere, even though it's quite deep and dark and sultry. But with the San Francisco, I have the same thing as I have with the Petit Pro 3. This has some lovely shades. I love this taupey thing and the teal that are in here. Those are great. What throws me off is the orange. I don't really love orange on me. Like today, I'm wearing orange in my sweater, but the color that's closest to my face is this pink, so that's why I feel I can still like pull it off. But here we have the rest of the palette. So it's a beautiful, beautiful neutral palette with a couple of really interesting shades in, but I don't think I would want to keep everything. Maybe if I have enough shades for filling these two palettes with Petit Pro shades, because they're a little bit smaller than the other sizes that Viseart does. So I would like to keep the packaging of this for sure. Like, this is just a bit plain and boring. These are really fun. So if I have enough shades, I may just reuse the Viseart palettes I already have. And in a similar vein, the London Étoile. Really pretty. This especially has a really lovely like purple in here, and also like this green tone shade. This yellow tone gold just throws me off in this one. It has really pretty shades in, but they are warm purples, and I don't love a warm purple on myself. I just prefer a more cool tone thing. So in the end, I remember the San Francisco being my favorite of the two, but of all three of these palettes, I'm like, was it worth it in the end? I think yes, because they confirmed my love for the brand, but I now just have other palettes from the same brand that I just like so much better that I do this, and these are not the kind of color stories I reach for and that I really want to have. But as I have fallen into this trap, like within my makeup journey, I used to fall into this trap of like Pokemon gotta catch 'em all kind of vibe with eyeshadow palettes. So I had that with Viseart for a while. I used to have that with Too Faced, Urban Decay, ABH, like the big brands that were around at the time. I really, really wanted to get every single palette that the brand did. And I've been trying to be better at that and like not feel that urge of having the whole line of a brand just because I like them. It's still a struggle sometimes because those Fantasy Cosmetica Bard and Sorcerer palettes are still pulling on my heartstrings, because if I were to own those two, I would own every single palette that Fantasy Cosmetica has ever made. So they would complete the collection, but they're not color stories that I would want. So I would fall in a similar trap as I do with these Viseart palettes. So I know I shouldn't, but a part of me still wants to. Am I making sense? I don't know. Maybe my brain just works in a weird way. I don't know. But yeah, the Viseart palettes, all three of them, I don't think that if I lost them ever, I would repurchase them or I would be interested in looking into them again. I would go for the Violette Étendue or the Charmeuse or the Vespertine over any of these three. LH Cosmetics, the Daybreak palette, I've decided to select some more recent things in this overview as well. And the Daybreak palette was my first LH Cosmetics palette. It was just something I wanted to try. It's light, it's pastely, it's cool toned with a pop of color. But these are spring colors, or summer colors, I should say, within the color analysis palette. So are these necessarily my shades? Not quite. And LH Cosmetics is a brand that doesn't swatch well, but with a brush, it looks beautiful. It is a little bit expensive for what it is because you pay over 40 euros for this small of a 9-pan. So that's why I held off of buying the brand for such a long time, because it's a brand I can only buy online. I finally was able to find them in store when I was in Sweden last summer, so that was exciting for me. And this is a beautiful palette. I think it is stunning, but this palette is, it's similar to the Viseart. It kind of set me up for buying the Aim Higher palette, and that I like better than this because that's a bit more taupe, like a little bit more taupey leaning. And it just has colors that I prefer over this. Is this pretty? Will this stick around in my collection for some time? Yes. So was it worth the purchase from I was being introduced to a new brand, fell in love, and knew that the palette that I was really, really eyeing up would be worth my time and effort? That's definitely what happened with this one. But with this kind of color story, it's not my favorite. Can I do pretty looks with it? Yes. In the summertime, I definitely reach for these softer things. And also in the winter, by the way, these things can look pretty on me because I tend to go deadly pale in the wintertime. And then these kind of shades just look really good on me. But yeah, overall, this Daybreak palette from LH Cosmetics isn't necessarily a must-have. It's pretty. If these are your colors, I think you will really enjoy it. And for me, it was only a good purchase because it made me realize that the brand can do good quality makeup. Then I want to discuss this. Again, this goes into the vein of I'm just trying out makeup and see what sticks. This is by Pink Flash, and this is I think I bought it this year, actually. So this is one of the most recent things I've discussed in one of these videos. It's the Pro Touch eyeshadow palette in 03. Strawberry something. I know that much. The exact name isn't on the palette, so I can't tell you. From what I can tell, I think this is Sea Beauty. I think. And as far as this color story goes, it was good. It was good. Especially for how cheap this was. I mean, we're going from LH Cosmetics, which is like 45 euros for 9 pans. Here you get 12 pans for around 5 euros. And I just spotted it on YESSTYLE. I think I threw this into my cart to get free shipping. It was one of those purchases. You know, you're like, I'm just shy of getting free shipping. Will I pay for the shipping, or will I just get another thing that's fairly cheap and just test it out? And objectively, this is good quality makeup. I had no issues playing with this. The mattes are pigmented. In fact, for my taste, it was a little too pigmented almost. It does have a pressed glitter in, but that was really pretty on the lids, and it actually sticks down without the help of a glitter glue, and it doesn't fall down your face, which is a bonus. It even has a duochrome shade in for that little amount of money, which is weird. The only thing is that I get so many shades that are exactly the same shade when I put them on. And overall, this is the kind of color story that I want to love on myself. But if I wear anything like this, it just looks like I've got pink eye. Like I've got an eye issue going on. And my eyes are irritated and red, and they tend to be a little bit irritated anyways because of my hay fever most of the year anyways. So it's just not a good look. So anything that makes me look overly tired or that really doesn't, it just doesn't really go with my skin tone as well. So that's why it was a bit of a miss. But in terms of like price point and what you get, I think you get a lot of bang for your buck. So if you're looking for very affordable eyeshadow, check out Pink Flash. I think they do some pretty things. Will this be a repurchase? Definitely not. I've now tried it. I like it, but it's not a must-have in my makeup collection at all. And then I haven't really spoken much about any of my Nomad palettes yet from what I can tell. This is the Land of Fire and Ice, and this is the only Nomad palette that I have that's not their 18 pan, but that is their 15 pan layout. So I don't think they still do this. Do they still do this? From what I've seen Nomad release, they now just do 18 pans, so they're always a little bit bigger. And Nomad is one of my favorite indie brand formulas, especially if you're new to makeup and you want to try indie makeup, but you don't want it A, to be overly expensive, and B, you don't want the boom bang kapow pigment that a lot of indie brands are known for. I feel that Nomad is a little bit easier to work with. It's blendable, it's easy to pick up with brushes. They give you a lot of playtime, nothing sets into place really heavily, yet it does stick to your eyes and you can wear it all day if you use a primer underneath it. So Nomad does really, really good high quality makeup. They do lovely things. And another thing that I love about them, they are a US based indie brand, but they do now ship from different fulfillment centers in Europe as well. I believe they are located in Ireland with one of their fulfillment centers, which makes it a lot cheaper if you're in the EU to get some Nomad cosmetics. Would love to see them come to MONOLITH because that would make it even easier, but oh well. But this color story, the Land of Fire and Ice, this wasn't my first Nomad palette. There is one that I decluttered. It was a Tokyo Harajuku, which everybody went crazy for, and I was just like, is this it? I was not impressed with it. This was the first palette that I tried from Nomad that I loved, that I just thought was a really solid palette. It is Iceland inspired, so it's got icy shades, but it also has the lava shades, and I'm not exactly sure what these shades are doing over here, but they're pretty. Similar in a vein to what the Daybreak has to offer from LH Cosmetics with these like lighter, almost pastel leaning shades. Really pretty. I can do some stunning looks with this. You can go very warm toned. You can keep it very cool toned. You can go more colorful. You can pull it really neutral. So many options with this one. Good shimmer to matte ratio as well. Really love it. But here's the thing. I like my 18 pans better. Like, I would repurchase my Haunted Europe and my Ghost Town USA over repurchasing this if I lost all of my makeup. Like, those would be top of mind of palettes I would miss in my makeup collection. This, I wouldn't miss. And not because it isn't pretty or because it wasn't good makeup, but it just wouldn't be a priority to pick up again, mainly because the color story is a little bit of a hodgepodge. You know, it's pretty, the shades all go together really well, but this is also the kind of palette where I need to put in some thought of how to put the looks together. You know what I mean? So for me, the Nomad Land of Fire and Ice probably wouldn't be a repurchase. And finally, a very new palette, because I only got it this year. I think I got it around May. I think I reviewed it in May or June time, and it's by Clarity Cosmetics. It's the Bloom palette. It's the mini Bloom palette, because Clarity Cosmetics used to do huge pans and therefore huge palettes, and they downsized, made it a little cheaper, and this was on MONOLITH, and I picked it up because this palette, ever since it had come out, I was intrigued by. Clarity is a brand I had never tried before, and we all know I love a good green, blue, purple color story. It's If I go colorful, it usually lies within that vein. Is this a stunning palette? Yes. Does it have stunning shimmers? Yes, especially this. This thing here. So pretty. Is this the intensely pigmented indie style eyeshadow that I just referenced? Yes. Are these shades intense, dark, grungy colors? Also yes. And still, I realized that this isn't for me. This is beautiful if you have a deep skin tone. On me, with my pale with my pale skin tone, this is far, far, far too deep. What happened with this on me is that a lot of the shades just looked really muddy and everything blended together because there's just too much of a contrast between my skin tone and these shades. On me, they pulled darker than what you see in the pan. Darker than what you see in the pan. So was I disappointed with it? A little bit. Am I glad I got to try the brand? Yes. I tried another palette by the brand that was a bit more successful for me that I definitely want to keep around. But this one, I think it's just going to be better for someone with much deeper skin tone than me. It was just really dark, really intense. I struggled to make this look good in a blend because everything started to muddy together if I overblended the shadow. So this was just a little bit of a learning curve. And I think, you know, everyone can wear anything if you put your mind to it. I understand. But this is just not something I think I will whip out ever again. So was I disappointed in this purchase? Maybe a smidge, but I'm glad I got to try the brand, that I was able to test out something new. And it's a color story, as I mentioned, that I had been lusting after ever since I saw this being launched, and I was able to finally pick it up. And Clarity Cosmetics just, they have a bit of a strange formula, especially the shimmers. They feel like squidgy. You know the putty blushes that Stila used to do? Like that squidgy sort of feeling? That's the feeling of the shimmers. And I don't know why. It just kind of throws me off. It just wasn't my favorite. It's a beautiful color story. I'm going to find someone within my circle who's going to get a lot more use out of that palette than I do. That's a definite declutter. I already know that from the top of my head. Is it beautiful? Yes. Was it worth my money? Yes, for testing out the brand for sure. But it's not something I'm going to keep around long term. So you know the answer to the question of whether I would buy this ever again. And the answer is no. So thank you so very much for joining me here today. Those were the eyeshadow palettes that I wanted to mention in today's video. Please leave a comment down below if you have any of these. Have you tried them? What were your thoughts? I would love to know. If you haven't tried them, are there any eyeshadow palettes that you feel this way about, where you sort of bought them to try the brand and then you were like, I'm not really sure whether I like this enough. So that's why these eyeshadow palettes made it on this list, you could say. So thanks so much for joining me. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more by me. I make several videos every single week, so if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye.